Public CEO Report is a podcast that provides insights about the public sector and public policy for the benefit of decision makers and leaders powering our communities. I'm your host, Ryder Todd Smith, and today we're joined by Jon Holtzman, Managing Partner at Renne Public Law Group, and Dane Hutchings, who is the founder of the newly established California Public Policy Group. Jon and Dane, welcome to the Public CEO Report.
Thanks. Good morning, and thanks for having us, Ryder.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Ryder. All right. Well, first of all, you're two friends of mine, so it's always great to have friends together for a conversation. And today we have kind of some breaking news we get to discuss involving business activity and ventures for you two. But let's start with something more basic. Jon, how do you and Dane know each other?
Well, Dane was a lobbyist at the League of Cities. And I worked with him very extensively, particularly on pension reform, when I was there. And he was a complete ball of fire. He burned up my phone all the time, and he was, the most energetic lobbyist out there, basically. So that's how I knew him. We'd worked very closely for a couple of years when he was there.
I can vouch for that reputation as well, having learned of Dane through positive circles and then ultimately getting a chance to meet him when he used to be with the league as well as a lobbyist. And so you two met while Dane was busy being a lobbyist. Dane, how did you first encounter Jon and get to work with Jon?
Yeah, so Jon was at first was a member of the policy committee that I oversaw in my role at the League of California Cities. And his law firm at the time was doing some work with the League of California Cities on some pretty technical pension issues. That was also the subject area, one of the subject areas I spent a lot of time in at my time with Cal Cities. And I think Jon and I just immediately were thick as thieves, had the same sort of passion for local government, drive, motivation. I sort of whether he liked it or not, Jon became a mentor of mine. I just said, okay, I'm going to go to you now for advice and counsel. And luckily he was receptive to that relationship.
That's great. So I guess speaking of Jon's drive and entrepreneurship, Jon, can you tell me a little bit about the origin story for Renne Public Law Group and then maybe walk us a little bit in, well, let's just start with that. Origin, Renne Public Law Group, and then the expansion of the three divisions that you now have.
Sure. So I had been in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. I was one of Louise Renne was the city attorney at the time, and she had just been elected. It's elected office in San Francisco, and she was looking around for folks. I was at Morrison and Forster, and I was also chair of a barristers committee CUB. So I was speaking an engagement, and she brought me in. I had always been very interested in government. I hadn't really realized the virtues of local government at that point, I think. And so I got talking to her, and ultimately she hired me as special assistant to her, and then eventually as chief deputy. So I spent 15 years in the city attorney's office, and obviously encountered, all the different issues that public agencies do through San Francisco. And I came to really love the area of local public law. So Louise decided in 2002 not to run again. I had actually gone off for a few years to work directly for Mayor Willie Brown as his head of policy and labor. So she said, hey, why don't we start a firm? So the idea of the firm from the very beginning was that we would be distinguished from the other firms in the space by the fact that we were basically a public interest organization that is devoted to furthering the interest of local government more broadly, as well as, of course, individually for our clients. So that had always been our goal. And having been on the inside for 15 years, I also had this very strong sense that, and maybe I always had the sense that lawyers aren't the answer to everything. I know that half the people who are listening to this are going to be laughing and say, are they the answer to anything? But we'll skip that for a minute. So one of the real problems we have in government is talent training. It's hard to get good talent. It's hard to keep good talent. and then the problems go, beyond law. Every problem we see in law has an underpinning of some kind of issue of either, needs in structure, policy, management, operations, finance, or in the case of what Dane has worked on with us, problems that either have come from Sacramento or could be resolved in Sacramento. So that the idea was that we would have, in essence, a firm that is really a wraparound organization that could actually solve problems, not just solve the legal end of the problem.
Yeah, well, and I think, John, on that, with respect to RPPG in particular, I believe it was, I was at one of I'd been at the League of California Cities for about 5 years. Felt like my time there was going to come to a close, and I was exploring some other options. And it actually had been offered a position at a sort of a hybrid law firm, lobby firm of sorts. And as one of my mentors, I came to you and said, hey, what do you think about this opportunity? I think it might be time for me to move on. And your reaction was, well, this is, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but something to the effect of, well, this is about a year or two earlier than I had anticipated, but how about you just come work for me, and you can just open up this lobbying firm in Sacramento, and you and I can run it. We can figure it out. You can sort of figure out as we go along. And I think my response to you was something like, yeah. And then after that, I guess I'll play quarterback for the 49ers or something like that. And you said, well, no, I'm serious. Let's have a conversation. Let's do this. And I think from that point forward, it really it was on. That was in March, and late March, and I think in early April of 2019. Yeah, you, me, and Art met up at the Dragon's Gate Chinese restaurant in Jack London Square, and quite literally on the back of a napkin, kind of sketched out what this concept of how legislative advocacy on the state side and representing local entities can complement the law firm. And when we walked out of that restaurant, which we were probably the only ones in that restaurant, which was very strange for a Thursday night in the city, but
we're convinced that their main product was not food in that restaurant. But
the food was the food was decent, but the food was decent. The company was better, but we left that restaurant and we basically had a deal. And I think it was like 3 weeks later, we opened up the office in Sacramento. I mean, it was just, I mean, once we had the concept, it really set fire, and we just went for it. It's great. 5.5 years ago.
Well, I mean, partly when to the point of John having co-founded Renne Public Law Group, and you having looked up to him as a mentor, it's not surprising he would move with entrepreneurial haste and speed, and that you jumped on board, Dane. So, John, ultimately, the evolution of, as you described it, these wraparound services has been the creation of Renne Public Law Group, Renne Public Management Group, and then Renne Public Policy Group, which is what Dane and you co-founded together with your partners at Renne Public Law Group to create the lobbying division or group within the kind of family of entities that is Renne Public Law Group. But we're talking today because we had a slight reference to this of the California Public Policy Group. So Dane, this is kind of a transition and change going on, but obviously a transition and change that's being done in a collaborative fashion. Tell me about California Public Policy Group.
Sure. Well, going back to the Dragon Gate restaurant, we knew at that time that there would likely be a time, we weren't sure when it was going to be, but there would be a natural evolution and a shift and a spinning off of the entity. And the reason why, and maybe we can run a bill to correct some of this maybe one day in the future, but as it stands, if you are not an attorney at a law firm, you can't have equity in the firm. And so, it's something that John and I knew from the inception of this, that over time, as we continue to grow, that there would be this natural way of us being able to find a mechanism by which I could, myself and the team that we have cultivated over time, can have some actual skin in the game in building this. And so, I mean, we went in the past 5.5 years, went from myself, and I had one client for it was a 6-month contract, to fast forward, we have over 30 clients touching virtually every region of the state, diversified local government client base, and a grant practice and 10 employees. And so with the start of a new legislative session in January, you're going to see about 35 new lawmakers come in to Sacramento. We thought this was probably the best time to sort of have this refresh where we're going to be best positioning our clients while still staying very closely aligned with the law firm and sort of this new introduction of what is now the California Public Policy Group.
And Jon, could you talk a little bit about that alignment, that strategic alignment that keeps in place and the advantages that brings to Renne Public Law Group clients?
Well, they're still going to be, part of our kind of, I hate to say group of companies. It makes it sound like we're IBM. We're a very small organization, but we have in place. I mean, I don't expect there to be any significant change as far as clients can see. We work together. We'll continue to work together. This, as Dane said, I mean, look, I look at this as, that this is our, something that we've fostered, we've built, and now we're letting out into the wild, right? And, and I think this is very good for our clients because, the mission is the same. And again, we're a public interest organization, and I want and need for them to grow, and this is sort of a step that I felt very strongly they needed to take. We frankly thought we were going to do it earlier, but it just turned out it's harder than you think to stand up an entirely new organization. So we're intending, we will continue to be at conferences together. We will continue to speak together. Obviously, we will be referring work, among the groups, et cetera. But they will have, more independence, more ability to be the entrepreneurial selves that they are. So, for us, this is we view this as a big win for all.
Yeah,
for all of us.
And on that, Jon, I've shared with you privately, I see Jon as a mentor and a friend and an advisor. I mean, RPLG has such an impressive, sort of brand equity in this particular marketplace. Frankly, it would be foolish of us not to want to stay aligned. I mean, it just makes so much sense for us to collaborate on issues. I mean, we're still doing we have a joint reception that we're hosting at the Cal Cities conference where we're going to be welcoming clients, potential new clients, and all of our colleagues in the local government space. And in fact, we're also doing a joint presentation together with Andrew Shen, who's an attorney, a senior attorney over at the law firm, and myself are going to be co-presenting for the City Clerks Conference, going over all the new election and transparency laws. And, because again, I think where you're seeing this benefit is clients are still going to be able to see both the political and the policy angles. They're also going to be able to get the legal expertise and background, and how it really, those two things really do have so much synergy working together. And so we're excited to continue that relationship as we move forward.
So it's phenomenal. You have this history going back to 2019 of collaborating as an entity. And then, Jon, I appreciate your comment that fundamentally for clients, nothing should change really. All right. I mean, they're still getting access to Dane for lobbying services. They still have access to Renne Public Law Group for legal services. The collaborative spirit remains. Dane and his team have an entity and a long-term map for themselves as well, which is good for stability and consistency. But let's reflect back on the last since back 2019. Like, what are some project areas or items that you guys have been able to collaborate on that have helped move the needle for some of your clients?
Well, I can talk about one area. There've been a number because also, I mean, it goes without saying that lobbying, has a legal component to it. You don't have to be a lawyer to be a lobbyist, but let's face it, we're passing laws. So we have been involved with them in analyzing housing legislation, for example. We, of course, continue our collaboration on pension-related stuff. Dane and I are a unit on that. I will say, courtesy of Dane, I've gone from a PERS critic to somebody who we work really well with them and can solve clients' problems with them. I kind of miss the days when I could just bonk them, but anyway. So I don't know, Dane, you've got I'm sure some other examples.
Yeah, I think the first thing we sort of hit the ground running on was a very complex. It was more of an administrative lobbying issue with respect to the creation of a new joint powers agency for fire-related services. But you had multiple agencies that needed to migrate both their classic and pepper members into one agency, and so we had to do some very careful both legal analysis, administrative advocacy, coalition building, and we were able to get really the first JPA to be recognized for regional fire services to be able to retain both their classic members and their pepper members as one recognized unit. And that was really we hit the ground running on that really major project, which really changed the fire service offering for the entire region of the peninsula in California, which was phenomenal. And and moving forward, again, I've leaned on the law firm quite a bit on digging into some of the unhoused population issues that we've had, some of the labor issues that we have. And it's not just about providing that legal analysis. Contracting is a major issue that continues to come up each and every year. And we've got some of the best folks in shop at the law firm that have navigated these cases. And so it's getting that perspective that helps us really bolster our arguments for our clients when we're working these bills in the Capitol. And then, even we've had issues, when we've on the grant writing side, we have worked with the lawyers on analyzing CEQA documents for some of our clients on some really competitive hazard mitigation funding grant opportunities. And so again, it's just there's such good synergies where you can tap those experts that can give you a fresh perspective or that can really enhance your ability to advocate for general funding, for grant funding, or a piece of policy or administrative action. And so we've tackled a lot in the last five and a half years or so in collaboration with RPLG.
I'm sure having an attorney on speed dial to work through legislative impacts is immensely helpful to your job as a lobbyist. So you both were reflecting on some policy areas where you were able to have some effective synergy between the lobbying side and the legal analysis side. You're also both actively involved in dozens and dozens of clients across the state and in cutting edge conversations on local government policy issues. If you look at your 12-month or 24-month calendar right now, what else do you see as some of the pressing challenges facing public sector organizations from your vantage points in the local government space? Maybe Jon, I'll start with you on that.
All right, sure. Yeah, so I think what we're facing, I'm going to start a little broad here, which is as is my want. Look, I think governments are more than anything else facing a tremendous challenge in how to, particularly local governments, and how to effectively, efficiently provide services in a way that the public appreciates. Government is a little bit under attack, obviously. Certainly federal government's more than a little under attack. Local government, in truth, is less so, although I think it spills over. And we are seeing, frankly, a little bit of a rash of dare I say, a little misbehavior even on the local level, challenges on council levels. I think some of the atmosphere nationally has bled over into the functionality of local government and into the reputation of local government. And so I think the broadest challenge that we have is to deliver with, more limited resources, and to enhance the reputation of local government as the government that delivers. And the fact of the matter is it does. You know, every time something goes wrong, and as a lawyer, of course, I mostly see things that go wrong. You know, it's a kind of a biased, it's a skewed thing. For every agency that everything's going right, there, you know, I see the one that's not. You know, every time anything goes wrong, you know, these days it reverberates, right? And every time there's dysfunction, it reverberates, and it causes people to, you know, not want to support, you know, revenue measures, to generally have, you know, cynicism about government, the functionality of government. And so I see very broadly, you know, that, you know, I guess in my mind, we're on a campaign to show people, whatever you may think of the national government, whatever you may think of state government, you know, your local government is delivering for you. So that's a very broad take, but I really think that's the macro issue that we face, you know, coming up. Obviously, within that, you have, you know, housing issues are very difficult. You know, homeless issues are very difficult. There are a lot of issues that are, you know, I think extremely hard to solve that go into the equation of, hey, is local government really doing its job? Crime, you know, fact of the matter is crime may or may not really be up, but it's certainly perceived to be up. Certainly petty crime is up. You know, so I think these are all, you know, challenges that we're facing, and underneath each of those problems are, you know, both technical problems that need to be solved, and, you know, frankly, policy issues that continue to be debated.
No, and Dane, how about, so first of all, totally agree with many of those points, John. In particular, Pew Research does really good analysis on survey work on longitudinal studies of trust in government at various levels, state, federal, local. Local has always fared better than the states and the feds on that trust factor. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Partly it's because you can see that government in action every day, and it's a little more tangible because you get to experience it. Maybe you get to know the Parks and Rec person that you're interacting with, and they're teaching, you know, they're teaching little Gloria how to finger paint, or you're interacting with an officer and having a good experience. So at the local level, we have certain advantages for building trust and maintaining trust. But even local government has suffered from those pressures. And, you know, if I had to conjecture, I'd say part of that has been, felt a lot of local governments for implementation of COVID policies. And I think that turned off a big chunk of society to get pretty upset about how that all went down from at least a segment of the population. And the cities found themselves on the front lines of a lot of those policy deployments. So there's been a precipitous decline in trust in most institutions ever since COVID policies came out. So concurring with your points, John, I agree. Dane, you got some, you want to support those or add to the pile of challenges and issues you foresee out there?
Yeah, and I my lens will come a little bit more from the direct interaction between state and local government. So, I mean, you look at, and I made mention of this earlier, but to get into a little bit more, you know, in 2012, there was a ballot proposition that passed that established these new term limits for state lawmakers, and essentially set 12-year term limits. And so from 2012 to 2024, we will now have seen a complete turnover of 120 lawmakers. And so with that, you see sort of these floods coming in on these even years. And so you've got 30, you know, I think I want to say 35 potential new members coming in. And while, you know, a lot of state lawmakers in the past have come from county government, city government, special district government, some sort of local government, that trend line's really moving in a different direction. You're seeing a lot more, you know, activists. You're seeing a lot more community, you know, NPO folks. You're seeing labor leaders that maybe have sort of their view. You know, everyone's bringing their own unique view to the world, and you know, but at our core, as advocates for our clients, whether it be lobbying or grant writing, we couch ourselves as storytellers. You know, we tell the stories of our clients that we are privileged enough to represent. And so it's being that conduit between walking lawmakers through, hey, here are the implementation challenges that your particular policy may have on local government operations. These folks are closest to the people. They're the ones who are, to your point, Ryder, on the front lines of trying to have to answer some of these difficult questions, you know, if something's happening in their community. it's not easy for a city government to say, well, we can't do anything about it because the state told us we can't. And so we have to find creative ways to tell our stories, to make sure they resonate. And that's how we move the needle for our clients, right? And local agencies I think are particularly in need of having a conduit to Sacramento, because we're seeing 2,000 plus bills introduced every year. And by my look, I mean, we're tracking actively, 850 of those bills, because they have a real tangible impact on local government, whether it be your parks, your public works, your sewers, your infrastructure, your actual governance, how you can govern those that elected you to represent them. And so really, and with less of state lawmakers coming from local government, there's a lot more kind of onboarding and education that's needed, particularly in the future. And so it's sort of it's more of a broader take, but it is something that I'm looking at, and how do we best ensure that our clients' voices are heard, that they are vigorously represented, and that a lot of times holding the line on pieces of policy, but also working collaboratively and advancing common sense policies. But this is all stuff that we're going to be looking at in 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, it's thank you for that comment about kind of the origin story on our state legislative folks and where they're coming from and their perspective. I'd love to actually see. I've heard similar commentary about a changing kind of source of elected leaders and a reduction in overall local government historical elected position in our state legislative folks. And then as a result, changing perspectives. It'd be interesting to actually get data on that, right? Go back to 2012, look at how many of the state legislature actually came from a city council or a board of supervisor or a special district in California, versus where that is, say, in 2024, as we get through this election in 2024, just to do a comparison and contrast to really highlight that with some real data. It sounds like a great project for the Institute for Local Government, since they represent and work with all three of the local government kind of strata between special districts, counties, and cities in California. But that is a very interesting point. It's going to really mean that for any of those interested, CSDA or CSAC, or for the League of Cities, they're going to have their work cut out for them for essentially making sure that folks who haven't had a lot of exposure to local government get a chance to really understand the role of local government, how that interplays with the challenges and frustrations and policy issues that have been bubbling up in Sacramento for many years. And certainly around from my perspective as a comms guy working with cities, I've certainly seen where housing policy issues were state mandates that came down to cities, and cities had various reactions to those. Some cities were in a great position to implement significant housing counts, and others, were not excited about it, or they lacked land space, or they had other complications. So, but ultimately, especially in some communities, it created real acrimony and frustration and political tumult in cities where they were essentially at the mercy of a state mandate that had been placed upon them as a result of changes in state law. So that local government perspective is going to be super important. Any other, from either of you, any other kind of notable issues coming up in the next 24 months? I don't want to drain you entirely on that, but I just figured I want to give you a chance, since you both are so insightful and see things from a global perspective.
Well, I can say I think a lot's gonna, and as much as I'm partial to state and local government, I try to tell folks, look, what's happening on the national stage doesn't have as big of a tangible impact state and locally as you may think. However, I being this year, you are seeing really this fundamental shift in the White House, and with these campaigns that are really rearing towards their conclusion. I think it's going to make a difference who wins the White House. I would anticipate some high level state folks maybe moving on if Vice President Harris is successful. I also would state that a lot is. We have several state ballot measures that have a considerable impact on local government should they pass. One of the great things that we were really happy to see was that the CBRT measure was pulled by the Supreme Court, which is really unprecedented. But that would have had an absolute undoing, a fundamental impact on services being provided. But what's going to be the fallout next year when we see policies that try and right size that, right? So we're going to see more housing legislation, more things in homelessness and unhoused populations, and certainly things as I would also state that depending on how the budget climate on the state level works, we are very mindful of playing defense with respect to making sure that local revenues are protected, that local coffers remain sovereign to those local agencies, because we have seen, if any past actions are indicated of future behavior, we've seen times where when the state's in trouble, the first thing they're doing is going and finding ways to divert what is supposed to be local revenue for local services to the state to make their budget whole. And so just off the top of my head, those are the things that I'm looking at as we move into next year. But a lot's going to be decided once November shakes out, and then have a little bit more clarity moving forward. And John, I don't know if you had anything else on that, but that's sort of my worldview on this.
Yeah, I think those are absolutely right comments, and obviously coming from the Bay Area, we're kind of looking at the selection, because we have the oddity of having the vice president coming from us. In fact, the vice president worked in our office, in the city attorney's office, when I was there. We're hoping, I suppose, I don't know if this will be true or not, that this will lead to a significant number of Bay Area folks being in charge, so to speak, in DC if the vice president wins. That's going to be a big shakeup for us. There's a lot of stuff going on. I would say the other big issue, look, you're not going to solve some of the really big problems in the world, particularly in the area of mental health and homelessness, without the active participation of the federal government. And, I don't want to, it's frustrating because that's not something Dane can fix, not something I can fix, right? But the kind of money that it takes, Grants Pass was a good start, very helpful. But you still have these very real underlying problems. And, I work a lot, for example, in the area of, police oversight. And I always say, one of the reasons why you see so many people who have, psychological problems get injured in interactions with cops is because we have no place to address those problems, to put them basically to solve those problems. So they cycle. And at some level, the more times you cycle through the system, the more risk, right? It's just statistical. We really have to be working on, I think, some real solutions there. Again, I come from that, more from the urban perspective, because obviously I'm in San Francisco. But obviously we're not the only city that has those issues, including a number of Southern California cities, as you know. And, and those problems can't be wished away. And, and it does, until this country takes a more serious view about why mental health is as important as physical health, maybe more important than physical health, and the federal government recognizes that, I think, we're going to struggle with these issues, and they are really, the number one issues.
Yeah, very, very fair point. And certainly, at least from a California perspective and the upcoming federal election, there could be some major shakeups that will affect some of that exact infrastructure you're talking about at the federal level. And an issue that disproportionately impacts California relative to others, given our disproportionate homeless population that we have in the state of California. So I will observe that. I appreciate your comment that treating mental health similar as we do as physical health, although I would also observe that given the physical health trends in America, I'm not sure that's a helpful indicator of how effective we're going to be if you just look at sheer obesity rates and things like that are plaguing our nation. So, these are challenges. These are challenges, to say the least. All right, I want to wrap up here, gentlemen, because we've been having a good conversation for a chunk of time here. But importantly, I want people to know how they can get a hold of you if they have any follow-up questions. So, John, what's your email address and what's your website?
So our website is publiclawgroup.com, and my email address is easy because it's jholtzman, JHOLTZMAN, @publiclawgroup.com.
Very good. And Dane, you got what's your scoop these days now that you're with your budding California Public Policy Group?
Well, Jon has been so gracious in allowing us to keep the Public Policy Group domain name, and so we're at publicpolicygroup.com, and I'm D Hutchings, HUTCHINGS at publicpolicygroup.com. It's the same email address I've had, and I would welcome any opportunity to continue this conversation or have folks connect with us on lobbying, grant writing, advocacy, or consulting. Absolutely.
Well, hopefully folks got a good taste today for the breadth of intellect and capability that you two bring as partners with each other, addressing policy issues in both the legal and the political environment or legislative environment. And I certainly enjoyed the discourse, and I appreciate our friendship and working relationship that we've had over the years as well. It's been a pleasure to watch you grow and succeed in both your endeavors in life. And with that, that's today's report. My thanks to Jon and Dane for joining us. From the whole PublicCEO team and myself, Ryder Todd Smith, thank you for your time.
We hope you learned something new and inspiring that will help you in your public service. Remember, PublicCEO has a daily newsletter that is free to those who sign up at PublicCEO.com. If you have feedback, questions, or guest suggestions for PublicCEO Report, please email editor@PublicCEO.com.